I'd like to call to order the City Council Work Session agenda on Monday, August 21st. It's now 5 p.m. There will be a regular meeting tonight and a special meeting after the work session. We are all around the table. It's nice to see everybody. We've been on vacation, for those that don't know. Everybody in the audience knows. We're back, and I hope you went to everybody and said, we're back. We're back. Get ready. And so this is kind of like a brand new time. So I never really at the last thank Sherry for being my vice mayor. So I'm going to do it right now. And then Wally, it's really great to have you here, and it's good to see everybody together again. So we have one item on the agenda, and again, council refrain from asking questions until staff presentations are completed. Staff will present information to council regarding the determination of a majority vote for elections and consolidated elections. Our new city clerk, Darcy McCracken, and city attorney, he's not so new, Attorney Roy Massey will present. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Good evening, Mayor and Council. We are here today to present information to you regarding the determination of a majority vote in consolidated elections. First, let's review what we're actually talking about. Undervotes are those races where either nothing has been marked or less than the allowable selections have been marked. Only those selections marked are counted, and it's displayed in the overhead as the first one on the left. Overvotes are when more than the allowable selections have been marked. In this case, every selection is considered invalid, and all selections for this race are considered an overvote. This is because there would be no way to determine which selection or selections were the intended ones, and that's indicated by the middle one. An unqualified write-in is when someone inserts a name when the person selected has not filed the appropriate paperwork with the clerk's office. Now, while we probably don't ever get anybody with the name of Donald Duck actually submitting good paperwork, we do see a lot of Disney characters as write-ins. For elections, the City of Goodyear is governed by the city charter, city code, and when not in conflict with charter, state law. The city charter and city code speak to elections in several ways, including the ability to elect at the primary by receiving a majority of all the votes cast. Currently, the majority of all the votes cast has been interpreted to mean the inclusion of overvotes, undervotes, and unqualified write-ins. 10 benchmark cities were contacted to learn how other communities determine votes, to include the overvotes, undervotes, and unqualified write-ins. 7 of the cities base the count on votes for candidates, although the specific language used may be different. 1 city determines the majority vote based on the votes for candidates for mayor in the election. Of the 10 cities, 8 are charter cities. 1 of the other cities that calculates the majority using overvotes, undervotes, and unqualified write-ins, Peoria, did prevail when taken to court based on the ruling that allows charter cities to govern themselves. The state and county were not used as comparisons, as they used the primary election to determine who goes to the general election for parties and the general election to determine between the parties. Therefore, undervotes, overvotes, and unqualified write-in votes are not a consideration in any of those races. Article 1, Section 23 of the Charter allows the Council to prescribe a procedure to clarify items when necessary. Existing Code 231, primary election, was included in your packet, as well as language to clarify the majority vote. The suggested language states, for the purposes of this section, votes cast shall mean a legal vote actually cast in the candidate's race for a legally eligible candidate, and excludes ballots and other votes that were not actually cast in that race, including overvotes and undervotes. If Council determines this is the route that they would like to pursue, the ordinance drafted by the City Attorney would return to Council for a formal vote at a future regular meeting. It is staff's recommendation to clarify the current City Code. Is there Council direction to move forward with the clarification?
Thank you. Yes. All right. Thank you. So you're saying good break for you or good break?
Yeah, if you want to discuss, I think
yes,
there's two sections.
I do want to discuss, so I just want, where we're going to start. Sherry, go ahead.
I don't want to say it seems like a no-brainer, but it seems very simple. This looks like, and I couldn't find anything here, that it was just an interpretation. At some point, someone started interpreting that way. It's not like written that it has to be that way?
Do you want to answer? You want me to answer?
We couldn't find anything in writing going back many years to indicate why they started to include it, or at what point they used it, or what point they didn't. We just found that the current practice is that they did it that way.
It's probably since Dee was here then.
What year did you find it? Was 2000?
We went back to 2001 and
Yeah, I'll
found
bet
that
you, yeah.
it went kind of back and forth. There wasn't really a lot of consistency.
I guess my point is, it just seems like common sense. If there's still, if neither one still gets 50%, it's still a runoff, right? So if we have a candidate election and there's 42 or something along those lines, you still have a runoff, right?
Right,
That is
correct.
Okay, so you're not taking away the runoff, we're just making sure that just the people who vote count.
You're just defining what the votes cast terminology means in the charter, and it's a little inconsistent out there, as Darcy pointed out. Cities do it differently and have interpreted it differently, so it'd just be the council authorizing its power granted under charter to make a clarification on this process. And it's really just definitional, and I think it does bring some clarity.
Okay, I'm good.
Joe?
I think piggybacking on what you had just mentioned, I believe in the KISS method. Keep it simple. If the authorized or legal votes, which is if you have 4 for 3 spots, that wouldn't count. If you have an overvote, that wouldn't count. If you have an undervote, that wouldn't count. So if there was 5,000 ballots turned in that had voted for council member seats, then all you would need is 2,501 to get your 50 plus 1. That's my interpretation how it would work. Because you wouldn't count the overs, you wouldn't count the unders, and then you wouldn't count, let's see, overs, unders, or the write-ins that are invalid type of thing.
There are a little bit more calculations that go into it. You do have to divide it by the number of seats that are up for election, but that, and then in half of that, but that would then arrive at the majority.
Yeah. Yeah, because to me, if they only voted for one of the 3, to me, that would be a 1. You know, if they voted for 2 of the 3, that would still be a 1. If they voted for 3 for the 3, that would be a 1, which means at the end, you total all of those up, and if there was 5,000 valid ballots cast, then 2,501 would be enough to win the primary. That's how I see it. Now, whether you can interpret that way or not, or whether the others agree with that, I don't know. But to me, that's the right way to do it, because even if you vote for 1, it's a legitimate vote. So if you start adding those all up and make you 3 times the number of seats, then you're skewing it, and then you're doing the undervotes, which to me doesn't make any sense. That's just my 2 cents worth.
Is he interpreting undervotes correctly?
Actually, undervotes wouldn't, you count just the votes for candidates. So undervotes, while it comes up on the report and was added into our calculations prior to now, we would not be counting them going forward. It would only be any actual vote for like candidate A, B, and C. It would not be for, if you only voted for A but not B and C, it would just be 1.
But what it does do, it's an accounting system, in a sense. That's what I got out of this. So anybody running for office or anybody on the council can look at that to see where, okay, why are we having all these people vote for one candidate when there's 2 up? And why are they just not voting on some of them? And so it does give you somewhat of a history for people to go back, if a candidate wants to go back and see. And second of all, even if we changed to go with everybody else, they're still doing that at that level. They do under and over, they keep count of that, isn't that correct?
It would show up on the reports,
Okay.
but it would not be counted in our
Yeah,
calculations.
but it does. So it's not like we're the only one that does this.
No.
So, okay. Bill?
It's so simple, I'm almost speechless, but I think the thing that we should really talk about is we aren't doing this because everybody else does it. We're doing this because this is the right way to do it, to count the votes that have been cast and not the ones that have been cast in error. And I think that that's an important distinction. You know, sometimes we get wrapped up in doing things because everybody else is doing it. And I think the next topic is going to be the exact opposite of that. We're doing this, making this change because it's the right thing to do. And so I'm clearly in support of that.
Brandon? No? Go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with you, Bill. I think that that not having the extra elections, if we don't have to, is good for the city. It's the right thing to do. So if it's simple, just keep it simple, and I think it'd be better for the city going forward. So, I mean, yeah, living through it too. If you don't have to go through another runoff when mathematically it wouldn't have needed to go, then I'm okay with that too. So.
Joanne?
Thank you. Like everybody says, I mean, it's caused confusion, and it needs to be clarified, and I think most everyone's on the same page with that. I had one question, though. So I get the undervotes, I get the overvotes. The write-in section, obviously not Donald Duck. However, and I've never seen it happen in our city, but if it was to happen that there was a qualified write-in candidate, how do their votes, they would be counted, correct? How does that come into play? That's what I just wasn't sure on.
When there is a qualified write-in, and a qualified write-in means that they filled out the paperwork and filed it with the city clerk prior to the election, and there are deadlines for that as well. Once we get that paperwork in the city clerk's office, we actually notify the county, and what happens is that person's name is actually displayed at all the polling places, and those people that actually get an early ballot, they would actually get an insert with the information for those write-ins that are qualified. So, and they actually have to do a hand count down at the county when those write-ins are actually written in.
Okay, so they can affect that 50 plus 1%, correct? Isn't that?
That would apply because
Okay.
they are considered a qualified candidate.
Thank you.
Anybody over on this side? Any more discussion? Wally?
Yes, thanks. I've been going over this a lot because I am, well, I don't want to say I'm a victim. I don't want to say that's not right. I am a product of a runoff. I won the primary and beat Joe, but when we ran off, he beat me. So that's when they really started counting the undervotes. I can't find through all of the history that we were counting the undervotes and the overvotes really in all of the other elections preceding that one election. So possibly someone had a mindset that every vote had to be counted under, over, and whatever. I don't know what. I don't know. But most organizations that you belong to, it's a simply majority vote. A lot of them, Robert's Rules of Order allows for a majority vote and a 50+1 vote. And I think runoffs are great if you have to have them, and we shouldn't not have them if that happens. But by changing the ordinance, we'll never have another runoff. What do we do if there's a tie vote?
No, there'll be a runoff. There could be a runoff. Yeah.
Well, I don't know.
Let's have the
If they get
still be a
50+1,
let's have the city clerk
Yeah.
answer that.
There still is that possibility that there would be a runoff.
if they don't get 50%.
Yes, and if there was a tie, that would actually lead to an automatic recount. But that in and of itself is like, it's hard for that to actually occur. It doesn't happen a lot. And when that would happen, then we would actually, if we had to go to a runoff, then we would go to a runoff.
They would actually do a runoff, but that's good. Yeah.
Yeah.
This just brings
So-
clarity to
Yeah.
just brings clarity to, it's just not, right now it's vague enough to be able to do what you want, and now we're just
Yeah.
gonna bring in the guardrails a little.
Yeah, well, when we had our runoff, it was, enjoyed the runoff because it was fun to go back out and start all over. I don't know that Joe did, but,
Well, it's just so much fun. I know how you.
well, I had to run,
That's the one thing we
I
can
know, I
definitely
had to
say
run back
tonight
to
on the
back.
record. Oh,
But
it was just great.
it was, yeah, it was really interesting though, but it wasn't really that difficult. But I see, if you're going to talk about the money value, everybody seems to have the dollar as the bottom line. They think that we shouldn't spend too much money and and have duplicate election, and I understand that. So I think it would be a lot simpler if we simply did 50 plus 1, if that's what we're going to do, or are we saying just the majority vote?
Well, we're actually speaking to what's calculated and coming to that majority. The majority would still remain the same, so it would be the 50% plus 1, but it's what we use in order to get there.
Okay, and
is
then,
what we're
so you
retaining.
could do every vote that's casted and count all those, and then it would be 50 plus 1 of that amount, not the under and the over.
Well,
Right?
since you mostly have candidate races where there's 3 seats, then you do have to remember that you do have to divide by 3 in order to get to
The
the first
50%,
number.
sure.
That then you then split that in half.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion? All right, that was quick. Okay,
Okay, we've got one more.
yeah, go ahead.
So the next section of this is going to be talking about consolidated elections. The city charter determines the timing of city elections. Currently, elections are set for March and May of odd-numbered years. Additionally, the city has all-mail elections, meaning there are no polling places on Election Day, and all registered voters receive ballot automatically in the mail. State law was changed in 2012 when the legislature required all elections to be in the fall of even-numbered years and called it consolidated elections. Several charter cities challenged the law and prevailed, which resulted in charter cities being exempt from changing to consolidated elections based on their charter. The city has the ability to determine if they wish to change to the consolidated election dates currently in August and November of even years. A couple of the reasons to move to a consolidated election date: saving money by splitting election costs with the county, and we are looking at 50 cents per voter compared to $2.12 per voter, which is what we pay being a standalone election. Also, it could possibly increase voter turnout. And I say possibly because we did some research, and we did include, Avondale was requested by Councilmember Loretano, and also we included Surprise. And we included Surprise because Surprise was an all-mail ballot election city prior to having to go to a consolidated election date. And as you can see, there's no clear-cut, yes, everything goes up. It goes up and it goes down and then it goes up, and I really couldn't say it increased the participation of the voter. So reasons to stay with the spring of odd years. It does allow the city to remain with an all-mail election, making it more convenient for voters to participate. And that it also allows voters that are not here in July and August to participate. If we are consolidated, the positioning on the ballot means the city candidates in the middle of the ballot, and questions would be at the end of the ballot. Any questions on the general ballot would be a tagline only, and a tagline is where it says a yes vote will do this and a no vote will do that. And just kind of as a display, this is one of the consolidated election ballots. This was actually from 2006, but it was still consolidated with a bunch of cities, towns, schools. And as you can see, it's long, it's involved. And the city candidates actually were in the middle of the ballot, and the questions for cities were actually at the end of the ballot. Higher turnout does equate to higher signature requirements on initiative, referendum, recall, and candidate petitions. Faster results from the county right now is what the city enjoys for all mail ballots. A couple days as opposed to over 2 weeks for consolidated elections. City Hall may or may not be a polling place. The county decides where the polling places are. More political signs during the election. And right now, primary ballots are distributed based on party affiliation, which means that independent voters on the PVOL, or the Permanent Early Voter List, would have to do an extra step to get their ballot by mail. And the next slide gives more information on that. So it's important to note the makeup of our voters. As of August 8th, the city of Goodyear had 40,912 active registered voters, with 30,692, or 75%, on the Permanent Early Voter List. The PVOL allows the voter to receive a ballot in the mail for any election, not just Goodyear, in which they are qualified to vote, which can include school districts, county, and state elections. We've listed the party breakdown because with consolidated elections, the primary election is geared towards the parties, and independent voters on the PVOL will need to make that extra step to get their ballot. and that's over 30% of those voters on the People are independent voters. And when I say an extra step, all the independent voters actually get an extra card in the mail, and it's up to them to make that extra step to contact the county to let them know which actual ballot that they want. They can request the Republican, the Democrat, and they can also request just a city and town only. And it depends on whether the party has opened up their primary or not, and that can sometimes change for the other parties. Staff has no recommendation regarding consolidated elections, but we have identified the two possible options. If council opts to move towards consolidated elections, the charter would need to be changed and would require an election and approval by voters. Terms for existing council members would need to be adjusted to allow for the change in the timing of the election, which would mean more or less time in office. If council should decide to refer the question to the voters to change the charter, a possible next step would be to establish a charter review committee to review the charter as a whole for any other changes needed. If council decides to stay with the spring and odd-numbered year cycle, no additional steps are needed. And that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Who would like to start? Bill?
This is kind of a left field question, but the cost for the election has always been, I'm going to say disproportionate. If the city ran by itself, it has always been more than if it ran on the normal cycle, correct?
That is correct.
So whether it's 50 cents now and $2 if we do it on our own, 50 cents if we do it per voter, it's always been in some proportion like that. So for me, I go back to when this city was chartered, there was an intentional decision made to separate our election from the big cycle so that we can stay focused on the issues that are important to our community. And I don't think that's ever changed. They intentionally knew that it was going to be a process that was perhaps going to be more costly, but it was going to be more effective. And the people were going to be really concentrating on Goodyear issues. And for that, I thank them. Now, fast forward to 2017 or 2016 when we had the last consolidated election, and we are a nonpartisan body. And I don't think we've ever seen as partisan a voting period as we had in this fall election. And I would hate for that to spill into what is a nonpartisan scenario here at the City Council. There's a completely different makeup. Some of us are independent, some are Republican, but we all have the same focus. And the minute that starts to change, when we start applying party to what we're doing, I think we're headed down a very deep, dark rabbit hole that we're not going to get out of. So I'm going to leave other comments for everybody else, but for me, I do not want to see a change to the charter.
Jerry?
First of all, let me applaud Bill. I think that's very, very well said. And I think a lot of the public doesn't realize that. When we look at our charter document, that's our founding document. That's our Constitution. Although I would love to save money, and I know Bill, from sitting with him for years, loves to save money. Yes. I mean, he will squeeze every penny he can. And I appreciate that. But I think this is more than just saving some dollars. I agree with the nonpartisan partisan. That is one of my biggest concerns. And when we look at, we have a third of independent voters, and there is talk from both of the major parties of closing their primaries. We're going to disenfranchise voters, not just the people who may be going away and have to get an absentee ballot, but I am very concerned of a disenfranchising of a third of our residents. That is a big concern to me. And just the extra step. We take that into consideration of the nonpartisan issue that Bill brought up and spoke very well about. And then we also look to see how the county had run the last election. People left voting lines because they were too long. People did not vote. And although, they may get another crack at the general election for the statewide election, that would be the only crack that they would have had we been on that ballot for the city election. So they would have been disenfranchised for another, 2 to 4 years with regard to that. I haven't seen improvement in the county, and I don't think that's a good idea. So I look at that, and we've had all the discussions again about just going either before or after all the judges, the questions, the propositions. You would get lost, and it would become partisan. And we are the area of government closest to the people. And as the closest area to the people, we need to make sure trash is picked up. We need to make sure that, services are done for our citizens. We don't bicker. We may disagree, but we don't bicker. We're not partisan. And I don't want to lose that because I think we run well. And I don't see changing our founding constitution charter document to save money, because I think the good is in where our elections are now, and I would agree with Bill.
Joe?
It makes it difficult being number 3, and I can imagine when you get number 6, it's going to be worse, because I tend to agree with both of those arguments. I remember when this was being up for suit by the state, and I thought at that time, and we've had this discussion in the past, where partisan is one thing. Since we're nonpartisan, our elections tend to get solved for the most part in the primaries. And unfortunately, you're going to disfranchise a lot of people who are out in that period of time versus the partisan election, because you could be gone in the summertime and you may not elect your particular Democrat or Republican to run in the general election, but you'll have another shot of voting for that person. Where in our case, if you get rid of that, you're going to be, in my view, disenfranchising. There were several cities that went to that consolidate, and, as Councilmember Loretano mentioned, that got very partisan, and we don't want to do that. We deal with, as you had mentioned, police, water, sewer. Day-to-day lives of all of our citizens are affected by the decisions we make. We can't run like Washington, D.C. We can't sit here and argue on how we're going to do things. We got to get them done because their lives are affected day to day. So I kind of like the way the system is set up now. Everybody knows that I would rather save $1. I'm always fighting that on the council, but that old saying, penny wise, pound foolish, I think it would be making a mistake, big mistake, if we go down that path.
Joanne?
I'm in agreement. I feel that when our city began with its election cycles, that they did the correct thing. We've looked at this multiple times in the sense that what the state legislature tried to do to us by telling us what our charter should say and do, and we did not adhere to that, and we came victorious in that regard. I think that's important. I still feel that what we are doing currently, and just as you guys all eloquently said, is the correct thing to do. Coming into this meeting, wanting to hear how my fellow council members felt, I would have been just fine of saying, well, you know what? If the citizens felt that strongly and wanted us to change it, then that's their right, and the citizens should do that and let us know. But we haven't had people banging down our doors saying, oh, change it, because that hasn't occurred. And so what we have heard from the citizens, even though it may have been a long time ago, they said, we want to be at this different time, and we want our issues and our people heard, away from all the other chaos. And the thing of, would we have a better turnout if we were to go full-blown, with the consolidated cycle? I don't know. And the funny thing is because, Georgia, I remember, and I don't know, Joe, if you were on yet or not, but when we made the decision to go to all mail-in, the whole point and purpose was trying to raise the amount of people that would vote, for that. And that's why we did go all mail-in at that time. So, we have listened to the things that we can do to make it easier for people, to engage them better, to stay above the fray. I think we're doing all of that. And so I'm pleased with that. I think the sheer fact that just in our last, group of talkings, as we said there needs to be clarity as to how we count it. And if that stops some other general election, well, guess what? You just saved money right there, too. So, because it was done in the primary. So I think we're doing the right thing. And I'm certainly, if it's ever to the point that our citizens disagree, then they need to let us know, but we haven't heard that. So I think we need to stick with what our citizens said in the first place when they adopted the charter, and that is to be on the system we're on right now.
Thank you. Wally?
Well, I agree with all of my council members. Our election in March is a very personal thing to our city. That way, any of our issues are not lost in the grand scheme of things whenever we're on a multiple-page ballot. We're able to concentrate on just our issue and what's good for our city. And it also gives the candidates running for office an opportunity to have their signs out and not lost in the fray of the judges and the Supreme Court and the president, the vice president, the county attorney, everybody else that runs in November. And also, on the other hand, we have a lot of snowbirds that live in our city that are on the early voting list, but, you know, our ballots are not forwarded. And so if they forget to tell us where they are living, it's not, or, you know, visiting or wherever they are, those ballots don't go to them unless they give us the forwarding address to take care of that. So I think people are here in March. They know that's when we vote for our city. And I think we should do that because all during this last election, I defended being a charter city throughout the entire election, saying this is what the residents wanted. They sat down and wrote our charter. They said we were a city manager council form of government. They told us when our elections would be. They told us how to operate the city. And we need to continue that until it becomes apparent from the mass of our population that they want it changed. And I think if they stop long enough and realize that by having us only on the March ballot, we're only dealing with just our city and not everything else. And I think it's a win for them.
Brandon?
Yeah, I also echo the rest of the council. I think it's worth it to have ours off cycle. I mean, and not to be polarized and have more of a focused election for our city and our residents, so we don't get lost in the mix as well. And I haven't really heard. I mean, to Joanne's point as well, I haven't heard too much as well about huge amount of people wanting to have it switched over, and if they do, there's a process for that, and I welcome people who want to voice their opinions. So, but yeah, as of right now, I think I think it's good as a city. I know when I was out there knocking on doors, I was able to just have people focus on Goodyear. So that's all they had to worry about, as opposed to all the other bipartisan type conflicts and things like that were out there. So yeah, I think it's good for Goodyear. I think it's, even though I don't love spending money, I think it's worth it for our city to do that.
Well, I want to thank each council member for giving their opinion tonight on this, and it is, sometimes these things get started in a community and we're never really sure how far, how deep it is, but this one so far has not been, and there are people that are focusing just on the dollar, but on the other hand, we have incorporated, our city manager has very cost-saving programs for all the departments, and we are saving well over that. That's a small number compared to what we're saving every department, and that's saving taxpayer money. So when everybody thinks you're just giving it away, no. We're not giving this away, we're using it for a purpose, and I think this is good. And if you look at national politics right now, none of us are smiling on this. None of us are happy how it's going. The one area, nobody's solving any problems. Nobody cares what this citizen says and that citizen because they're so focused on a thin platform. And we're not that way. We're focused on a big platform of 79,000 people in this city. Not everybody gets their way on issues, but we try very hard to make that happen. And so it was good to hear this conversation, and I guess you're going to have to bring it back later for a vote, or is this stop here? How do we handle this?
I think we've got direction from council, we
Okay.
will not bring the issue
All right.
back at this
Okay.
point, but we will draft the ordinance on the other election issue and bring
Okay.
that back
Okay.
fairly shortly.
All right, great. Any other comments before we adjourn this? Okay, it's 5:35 and we don't start till 6, so you have somewhat of a break, so I'm going to,
Get some dinner.
yeah, right. Everybody's happy. This meeting's adjourned.